meetings across boards, exec, senior management, particularly on issues related to philanthropy, but more in an organisational context rather than a program context. So I'm doing work that probably is a little different to most folk in the marketplace. It's more advisory around strategy, culture, structure, working across organisation development projects, etc. So it's good fun, and I'm also sitting on a number of boards as well. So
yeah, you do, absolutely. Yeah. I guess you found now I know we've chatted a lot recently, and you're now in a space where I think experience has taught you is the space that needs the advice. Would that be right?
Well, I watched for a long time over my time in the sector. I guess that there's a lot we assume and a lot we come to what we think we know around philanthropy and fundraising practice. And I guess without being all-knowing in that regard, I guess I observed that there are some blockers in the way in which we serve purpose in an organisation if we don't truly understand what's happening around the way in which we engage people in a broader voluntary context. So, yeah, it's an area that I can play a role in from where I sit, having had some significant time in executive roles. And, it's fascinating too, being involved in board conversations, both as a board member, but also working with board members as well. So it's a different intersection, and one that I think is critical. It's not the only thing. There are many other terrific contributions across the sector, but it's one of those things that just moves the dial in terms of what's understood to enable good fundraising practice to occur and philanthropy to be fulfilled.
So one of the focuses of the fundraising nest in particular, this community hub, and I guess my desire for connection and what I've learned over my terribly small career compared to yours, but what I do love is connecting people, joining the dots, and offering opportunities for people to learn from each other. I think peer-to-peer learning is so important. People inspire people. So kind of on that theme, can you share an example of someone who's helped shape who you are as a thinker, connector, and doer?
Yeah, many actually. I mean, I think back right to the early days in my career, and as what was then a relatively probably 23 moving into the sector. These days, it's not uncommon. Those days, it was. I had a number of people that really acted as mentors that just gave me time and encouragement and let me into things and created opportunities, particularly in a voluntary sense around sector associations, etc. So, I remember people like David Benny, who comes to mind particularly, who just passed away last year, but a great friend and mentor. Dawn Smith in those early days, Frank O'Donnell, many people who really were much older than me had contributed. Probably someone that really stands out, and I guess right now in terms of timing, it's an important mention is Simon Joyot, who I built up a terrific relationship and friendship with over 20 odd years, and we taught together. And when I first set up my business 3 years ago, Simon was really generous and very, very sharing in terms of what she offered. So it's just on 2 years since she passed, and the sector misses her terribly.
It was, yeah, yeah, and we uploaded an interview with Simone on Friday, and with Tom's blessing. It was one of her, I think, it was only 2021. It's quite it was close to her passing. So again, that fierce, authentic kind of approach and telling it how it is. She's definitely an inspiration to me for sure. So tell me, what's your earliest fundraising memory?
Well, apart from, there's probably two things. I guess there's the volunteer fundraising we do outside of being involved in a professional context. So I still remember going door to door collecting when I was at school, and then church youth groups. I remember not doing particularly well at Bobs for Jobs in Cubs. I remember starting Rotaract's Project Santa in Adelaide back in 1982, which I was just actually reminiscing with my auntie about that because she made all the Santa outfits at the time. So there are a number of experiences. Probably the thing that really sticks in my mind when I moved into fundraising practice professionally was going to the first fundraising course that I ever attended about 6 weeks into starting and thinking, I'm never going to be any good at this. This is absolutely daunting. it was almost terrifying in terms of exposing me to a body of knowledge that I just didn't consider was so. So I think that was probably a jarring moment of reality check to say, there's a lot in this and you need to really turn your mind to it.
That's a perfect segue, because what I did this morning, as I mentioned earlier, we uploaded your video. And one of, at the very beginning, you talk about key lessons, and you mentioned how you were so surprised about what you didn't know. You know, fundraising was not what you thought it was. You didn't realise that there was technical elements and there was foundations to this, and that was a bit of a shock to you.
Absolutely. And look, it's a couple of things that have really stuck out for me. One is the deliberate pursuit of learning and knowledge and know-how, and to really continue to be attentive to that, but also to put the marks of professional identity around that as well, both in terms of qualifications and credentials, and just attending and respecting knowledge in fundraising practice. I think the other thing is understanding that if you assume to know fundraising but actually haven't tested that knowledge set, there's a lot that can go missing. And it's one thing to do that coming into a practice domain, but from a leadership context where you have executive or governance responsibility, there are some serious challenges if you really don't open your mind to that understanding and bring others who do understand what the practice is around you to help bridge those gaps.
Absolutely. I had a chat this morning with Dominique Arturakis, and she was talking about the collaboration that's involved for success. You know, how everyone in the team is surround yourself with great people who are greater than you, and how that is incredibly important in our sector, is to have fabulous people around you and be open to advice. And one of the things you mentioned there, it's kind of in the same thread in your interview, is that the things you learn from the most are the mistakes, and it's too easy to misapply learnings from the things that go well.
I don't really remember too much that actually went well. It's the stuff that doesn't go well is burned in your brain. And it's really those learnings that are not only searing, I guess, in the sense that they actually embed themselves in your recall and how you actually do something different beyond them, but they are the ones that really are most instructive. So when we like to share success stories, there's a little bit of, or maybe a lot of gloss and veneer around that. I mean, frankly, we can all be successful and sometimes perhaps on the run of luck, but it's what goes wrong that really teaches you things.
And I think sometimes actually it's not even about mistakes or what goes wrong, because shit does hit the fan, and it can be obvious, but actually it can be successful outwardly, but actually it's about going, okay, I know inside that could have been better because we didn't do this. So it's about, it's about kind of always seeking that growth. You talk about success and growth. So yes, that was good, but what could we have done better, or what could we have done different, or what were we going to do different that we didn't? So it's not just about the obvious mistakes.
Totally. And look, I'm borrowing a line there from Jim Collins in the success and growth analogy, because I'm a bit of a Jim Collins fanboy, I've got to admit, but I love that idea that the opposite to success is growth, because it really talks about the notion that we shouldn't be afraid to fail. More importantly, be afraid to try things and keep trying things until we do get the different result. So I think that's certainly a driver. But as a leader, I think we've also got to create the environment where people are encouraged to try things, and if things don't work out, that's okay. I mean, if we make the same mistake time and time again, it's a different conversation. But I think, we kind of have to reframe our way of thinking about this from a leadership context as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was at university, I got sent, I was allowed to go to the Case conference in Singapore. It was absolutely fabulous. It was, just what an amazing place to go for a conference. And I remember getting back and being so excited about some of the ideas I had, and straight away at that kind of whip, it was, we don't have time to talk about what you learned, and maybe some other time we can discuss what you learned, but we're busy, we've got stuff to do. And I remember thinking, did you just tick a box? You sent me on this amazing trip, but yet you're not going to allow me the opportunity to implement what I've learned. Who does that serve?
I find that's a massive gap in organizational thinking and practice. And even if the thinking is there, the practice probably isn't. And that is, how do you actually commit to and translate learning that people have undertaken? I mean, I think we can sort of almost be a little bit casual in the idea that yep, someone's gone off and they've had this experience and done this, and by osmosis that learning will actually translate through to what we do. But that's just complete nonsense. So making a deliberate commitment to translating learning into practice has to be something I think organisations and leaders need to step into.
I think it's huge. I think it's a huge gap. I've said it at the end of conferences I've hosted. I've thanked leaders for allowing their staff to come, but concluded that that's just one part of their job. Now they have to trust their staff to implement what they've learned, or there's just no point. And I think you're right, it's so huge. So many times staff don't get the opportunity to do it, and that's, you know, we will be advocating for that at the fundraising nest, that actually, you know, hold your leaders accountable to being able to, it's your professional development. How can you learn from it if you're not allowed to do it?
Yeah, there's a lot that can stop us, and I mean, I hear this, it's fair enough, there's business as usual and things get in our way in terms of getting busy doing stuff, but I think from a leadership construct, you've really got to actually think about what you need to do differently to get a different result. And again, nothing new in that particular adage, but if we keep getting sucked under the wheels of just doing the same thing, we actually don't move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you were you spoke in your interview with Jake around, which is kind of part of it, think very carefully and broadly around you. It's the drivers, the aspirations, the knowledge, and look at everything holistically as organisation, you know, and listen and explore for opportunities. And I don't think that's for staff and leaders. I think you mentioned as well, staff have to take ownership and responsibility for having a voice and asking the whys the decisions are made, or, you know, being bold enough to not challenge, but I think you can respectfully challenge or seek the reasons why decisions are made.
I mean, taking responsibility for the hard stuff and actually sharing, if you like, the accolades on the easy stuff. And it's the old joke of success has many parents, but I mean, it's really true. I mean, we can all sort of bask in some sort of reflective glory, but it's actually owning the stuff that needs to get done. And that's, I guess it's a leadership responsibility, but it falls to everyone really to also take that level of accountability.
Yeah, and so I can imagine people are listening to us now, especially maybe new or, you know, intermediate kind of level fundraisers going, yeah, that sounds awesome. But Nigel, as a CEO and a fundraiser yourself, what practical advice would you say to a fundraiser right now who's sitting listening or has an idea, or they're about to, you know, they're part of a project that they've just got some niggles down, they've got some ideas, like on a practical kind of level, what should they do? Should they talk to the CEO? Like how you know?
Yeah, and look, so much of what advice is given by me or anyone, I guess, is contingent on the environment. But there are a few things that I think are really important to do that, you know, you can do. Own your space. You know, really make sure that you are, as much as you possibly can be, that subject matter expert, and you're continuing to build on that, and own that space, that authority, that role that you occupy. Now, that doesn't actually make it so that people just fold over and actually let you do your thing all the time, but controlling that piece is something we all can do.
Yeah.
I think the notion of being clear about what you do know and what you need to know as well, so commit to continuous learning, being curious. I think recognizing the nature of organizations and people and politics and all that goes with it, again, you know, play smart in terms of organizational environments as well, and understand where that is. I don't mean being Machiavellian, I simply mean understanding the rhythms and the currents and eddies that all go with that. But also, I was chatting with someone this last week about this, you know when to stay and know when to go. It's a bit of the old Kenny Rogers, the Gambler song, know when to fold them and know when to hold them. You kind of really, sometimes you can be on a hiding to nothing. So if you own your space and you know your stuff and you're good at what you do, you're in a strong bargaining position these days more than ever. Yeah. So I'm not advocating flight and run and all of that, but I'm simply not advocating putting yourself in a position where you burn out and sort of carry a heavy load if you're just not getting traction. So you know, I think do all you can do, but recognize when there's exit stage right as well.
Yeah, and reach out to peers and to people who maybe are in the same space in the community hub, for example, and ask people for help. You know, if you're stuck on something, there's nothing like asking for help. Or even just, I found when some real challenging times, particularly in my last job, just chatting to someone I trusted. And even during the conversation, I resolved the issue myself. It was just being able to talk to someone.
Yeah, and that's another really important point. Create your connections, your networks, collaborate. I'm still surprised when I meet people that don't collaborate back into the sector, whether it's through associations, whether it's through other sort of connections, or all of the above. And I would simply say you're cutting yourself off from the opportunities. I mean, this is a collaborative sector. People are generous. That's generally how they have learned themselves. It's not truly competitive. So I think taking those opportunities really to connect with people is a significant turbocharge to what you do.
Absolutely. And I guess as well, just to finish that segment off, as a CEO, or as a fundraising leader, if someone does want to present a case for provide the evidence that supports, get the data. Leaders and CEOs, they like the data, don't they? They like the evidence that backs what it is you're trying to suggest or do differently.
Absolutely. And again, just to see that people have thought it through, have looked at different scenarios, and it's both quantitative and qualitative evidence and information that's behind things, but just really seeing that people have turned their mind. I mean, it's a business that is based on relationships, so there's always going to be different skews and areas of perspective. But I think just knowing that you've done some lifting rather than just slotting into the "we've always done it this way" groove.
Absolutely. And when you've got that relationship, when people trust you and they know that you care, they forgive. There's much more forgiveness there when you have a genuine relationship with someone. There's much more room for honesty, but honest critique. And I think that has to be both ways. I think. And when you get to that point, it's a nice place to be in. But you're right, you do have to be a bit bold and take be curious and seek evidence. That was one of your comments. Never settle for just what you know.
Yep, absolutely. And continuing to check that it's still so as well.
Yeah. So talking a bit more about kind of philanthropy, you did talk about donors not caring what your target is or how much you've raised. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Sure. Well, it's the funny thing I find in fundraising is we get obsessed by the money. And of course, ultimately, money drives the wills that enable social purpose to be served. So in saying that, it's not unimportant, of course, but I think we focus on the means instead of the end, I guess is really what I'm trying to say here. And no donor is really interested in what your budget is. No donor is really interested in how much money you've raised. They're interested ultimately in what their contribution is making to something that's important to them. So how do you create that connection between the purpose that you're serving, the beneficiaries that you're serving, the focus on doing that in a completely ethical and appropriate way, so the donor actually is seeing themselves as a contributing part of that solution. I think the other part of that is also this reality that in more cases than not, probably most, I can't really think of too many, to be honest, even with the most significant gifts, a single donor will not be the panacea to solving the problem that's being addressed. So helping people to understand they are part of something in a really connected and contributing fashion as well is terribly important. So I think it's just reframing those conversations we have with donors about what really matters, and it's basically getting stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's moved sideways a little bit. What do you love the most about your last 40 years, or what you're doing right now? What do you love most about your job?
I guess I kind of reached the stage where I was a bit over organisational life. I didn't know that until actually after, and in fact, I recorded that interview with Jake probably in days after leaving my role, and I was sort of just moving into my new adventure. But look, I like the change. I mean, it was time, and it's probably proven to be even more so than I understood. I love the opportunity to work with people across different organisations in helping them solve the problems they're trying to solve as well, whether we actually solve them, but addressing them, to bringing some different perspective and challenge, to recognise that folks have got a whole lot of capability, but often not always the time and focus. So just to bring in something that can help move people. And again, it's not me dropping in some sort of magic from a cloud. It's really just adding another voice, another bit of thinking, some other perspective to help shift, but importantly, embedding that thinking that people may be exposed to, so they own it, they actually build on it, and that capability is retained as well.
Yeah.
The best thing I can do is actually be redundant in working with people, because I've kind of served my purpose, help move something from a place to another place, and then people are getting on with it.
Yeah. So tell me, Nigel, we know who Nigel is. You've got an incredible credentials to you, but who is Nigel Harris when he's not a fundraiser extraordinaire?
It's kind of funny because I'm probably antithesis of what sometimes people might think I am. When I'm not that, I'm well, the important things for me. I'm married to Leanne. We've been married for, golly, what is it this year? 39 years, I think. It must be that. Yep. And we have a son and a daughter, both in their 30s. And our daughter and son-in-law have a baby boy, Remy, who's just on 6 months old. So he is absolutely the focus for all of us at the moment, and particularly my wife and I, because being grandparents is just the coolest thing. It's fantastic. And
Are you granddad, grandpa? What's your name?
I'm Pa, yeah.
Pa.
And and again, everyone will say this, I'm sure, but it's a different thing being a grandparent. He's just a gorgeous little boy. So I think the family, being son and his partner, and my daughter and son-in-law and grandson, I mean, that nucleus is important, and extended family as well. I think beyond that, golly, I like to sort of.
I think you follow the footy.
I follow the football. You're absolutely right. In fact, I'm a bit passionate about Aussie rules, and I follow a couple of clubs I many years ago played and coached, but these days enjoy following football. I dabble in trivia and a bit of music, and started to learn to sing a while back as well, and just do other bits and pieces. But I don't know. It's time seems to go. It's Len and I like to travel. That hasn't really been on the agenda for the last couple of years, so it's coming back into play as well, which is terrific. And that's kind of life, really. Yeah.
Oh, totally. We're just going to wrap up. The half an hour is going so quickly. What advice would you give to your younger self that you didn't know then that you know now?
Be more confident. Be bolder, but don't be brash. I don't think I truly was that. Certainly I kind of found my way, but I think and back yourself in as well. Know that it's going to be okay. I think sometimes you can be a bit too self-doubting and just spend a bit of time perhaps freezing yourself in wondering why and hoping why. Just believe, back yourself in, stick to your process, continue to be curious, and just have a crack.
I love that. No, it will be okay. That's perfect. And it's something I'm learning more and more, even just launching this, the tech was not working a week ago and I was distraught and so emotional, and then it all went fine. And I said to Isha, I need to learn that no matter what, it will be okay. And I'm still learning that. Nigel, it was so wonderful to have you join us today. Thank you so much. You're going to be around the hub, and as I said, Nigel is a Maven, and will be part of. Still teasing out the roles and what they're going to be doing, but Nigel potentially will have a presence in the hub when he's got a minute. That's the whole point, is to, when they have a chance, to maybe comment on this video, or they're busy people, but I'm sure if you was to ask Nigel a question or want to connect with them at some point they will jump back in. Nigel, I'm going to leave you for today while I finish up today, and if you just leave our studio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for including me, Michelle. Really grateful. Much appreciated.
All right.
Cheers. See you.
Okay, Nigel.
Bye.
Okay, Nigel, could you just turn your mic and camera off? I think you can leave the studio. There we go. Wonderful. Wasn't that a fantastic chat with Nigel Harris? And thank you, Nigel, for joining us in the studio today. If you missed this, you will be able to watch it live. Tomorrow, as I mentioned, we have Sue Barker from New Zealand Charities Law, and she will be discussing all things to do with charity law and her passion for what she does. And we look forward to uploading that tomorrow. And as I've mentioned, the 2 competitions are still running. If there's anything you want to reach out, we had a wonderful example of how the community can work today. Someone reached out to us and asked if we could share an anonymous question around database, and I think that's a great point that people raise. That's what the hub's about. It's about getting honest, open responses to your questions. So if you want to ask an anonymous question about anything in fundraising that you would prefer not to, you know, if you've got an existing supplier that you might have issues with, or you want to explore different systems or whatever, send it to Isha, and Isha will post that, and we will be the facilitators of managing that for you. I think the hub that we're using has explored an anonymous posting opportunity, but they've not developed that quite yet. So brilliant example of how the community hub is available for you to get that information. That's what it's about, you know. How do you get the information when you are you don't really, you know, have much chance outside of your office, maybe other than once a year. Anyway, that's enough from me for today. I am going to wrap up today, and thank you all so much. We've got a great community growing every day in the hub, and as we always say, this is your place, and we're excited, and we will keep going with our guests over the next couple of weeks.